In this video, we'll look at the different text tools available in Boxy SVG. We'll learn how to change the font and different attributes of the text using the typography panel, and we'll also learn how to download and embed fonts from Google Fonts, or from our computer we can import them as well and embed them into our SVG document. So to get started, we'll just hover over to this text tool. We'll left click to select the tool and then go to a location in our document and left click a single time to start typing text there. We can then just type whatever we want. And if we click a second time on our document, we'll create a new text area there. We can type in whatever we want here. To get out of this text edit mode, you can either hit the escape key on your keyboard. You could click up in the breadcrumb on the SVG document to get out of that mode. You could also just go into the transform tool and it will select that text. And see, it has these boxes around it just like any other object would, so we can change the size. This isn't changing the font size, it's just transforming this text element. We can also click a second time to rotate and skew just like we would any other object. Even once we have a transformation applied, we can still get in to edit this by going back to our text tool and then left clicking in the text, and we can insert some more text. You can do multiple lines by hitting the return key, and you can have a second line of text. And if you want to delete it, you can just select it and hit the delete key on your keyboard, just like you would any other object. This other tool here is the text path. With this tool selected, we can left click and keep the mouse held down, and then we can create a custom path that the text will follow. Then when we go in and edit this text, it'll always follow that path no matter what there is. We can type in our own custom text here, and it will always just follow that path. We can edit this path by going into the edit mode, and we can see the different nodes of this path that we can come in. We can press the plus key on our keyboard to zoom in close, and we can change the angle that this text follows, and we can create a custom path this way. There's other ways to create custom paths that we'll look at in just a minute, but this is one of the ways to create some custom text along a path. If we want this to get off the path, we can just select this, and we can go over to the typography panel, and we can scroll down to path and click this text on path button. That'll take the text off of the path. And notice it also has some custom size applied to it. If we want to change the size of a certain part of the text, we can either go into the text edit mode and click in to edit that text, or with it selected we can double click very quickly to get into editing as well. When we left click and hold, we can highlight a certain part of the text, and to change the size, for example, we can just change the size here in the typography panel, and it will only change the size of the selected text. If we want to change the size of everything, let's get a new box here. We can just select this text, and with it selected with the transform tool, we can change the size of everything in that selection. We can also change the font by just using this drop down here, and we can change to a specific font. There's different ways the font can be displayed, like bold or italic, so we can adjust that here as well. We can add an underline or an overline. We can strike everything out, or if we just want to strike out a certain part, we can double click and we can highlight just the word that we want to strike out. And with that highlighted, we can do a strike through it. We can make everything uppercase that's selected, or we can get back into having everything selected in uppercase, the entire selection, lowercase. So some really cool options that we have here. We could put this text on a path by clicking this text to path button, and that will put the text on a path that we can then edit with the edit tool. We can click and choose where the path starts, where it ends, and these handles will adjust the arc of that path. And notice the path is invisible, but to get this text off of the path, we can just click this text on path and it takes it off. And then we can just move each letter individually if we want to create a very custom path letter by letter. I'll do Control Z to undo that. Another way that we can put text on a path is if we have a circle, for example, or an oval or an ellipse. We can choose to have this here. We can select our text, and then we can select, with the text selected, hold down the Shift key and select the circle, and then go to text on path. We'll have to convert the circle first to a path, but now our text is part of this circle. So that's another way that you can put text on any custom path that you have drawn in Boxy SVG. The fonts that we have available in this drop-down are not fonts installed on my computer on my system. These are fonts from Google Fonts. And if we select one of these fonts, it will download the font from the Google servers, and then it will embed it in this SVG document. We can look at the fonts available in our font library as well, the same place where we can get vector art and different artwork and palettes. There's a section for fonts, and we can see an example of what this font looks like. And if we want to give it a try, we can either drag and drop it in, or with the text selected, we can go back to the typography menu and choose it from this drop down, and it will it will apply that text, that font, to that string of text. The fonts that are embedded in our document can be seen in the Defs panel. So we see we have 4 different fonts we're using right now. This Open Sans is the default font with Boxy SVG, and these other 3 were downloaded from the Google servers, and they're each being used once. We can drag and drop these in as well just by left-clicking and holding, and we see that this is now being used 4 times in our document. We can click on this number 4 to select all of those times it's being used, and we can move those around or apply changes to them together. For example, if we want to change the font of all 4 of these text areas, we can go into the typography section and change this font family to something else. And it will then download that font and apply it to all of these and embed that font in our document. Google Fonts is a good way to go if you want to download and embed fonts, but you can also choose custom fonts from your computer. To do that, we go open up the Defs panel, and we hit this plus sign down here at the bottom when we're in the fonts area. And we go add font from disk. I have a sample here on my desktop of a common font called Nexa Light and Nexa Bold. So we can try this Nexa Bold. We just go OK, or open, and it brings Nexa Bold in. So now this font is available to use in our document, and it's also embedded in the document. It's a good idea to read through the documentation. This particular one if we go into the folder, most fonts are going to have a document with it that talks about the uses that you can use that font for. You just want to make sure that it allows for embedding the font. So be sure to check with the font you're using to make sure you're allowed to embed it in your document. Not all fonts allow that, and not all fonts have the same licensing. One last thing I'll show is that if we want to change the color of our font, we can do that in the fill settings. It behaves just like any other path or object. We can change the fill color. We can also go to stroke, and we can add in a stroke, and we can change what that stroke color is as well, or the stroke width, or the opacity. We can apply gradients. Anything that we could do to path strokes and fill, we can also do to our text. I hope this has helped you see some of the different functionalities of the text tools and working with fonts in Boxy SVG.